Right. Hello, everyone. I am Alex Lim, your host, and welcome to AuthorStory, the home of authors and stories that matter. This episode's featured guest is Ryan Foland, who, with Leonard Kim, wrote this episode's featured book, Ditch the Act, reveal the surprising power of the real you for greater success. So, Ryan, welcome to AuthorStory. Thank you very much for being with us today.
Ahoy, it's good to be here. I feel like it's meant to be. I'm an author and I got plenty of stories.
Definitely, definitely. Okay, so Ryan, first off, your background. I mean, your childhood doesn't certainly didn't seem to show any greatness. I mean, given the way you grew up, I mean, I understand you were bullied, and yet you managed to turn that around. Can you speak a little bit about this particular journey?
Yeah, so for my youth, did experience a bit of backlash. I think primarily because maybe I didn't look like everyone else and I disappeared for 3 months out of the year.
Mm-hmm.
My parents, they're educators, so they were
Mm-hmm.
teachers and then vice principals and principals, and so we were always on a schedule. Every time the summer came around, we'd jump on the boat and head over to Catalina.
Right,
Now that
right.
was some of my most favorite memories, and I still head back to that same spot today whenever I
Mm-hmm.
can. But as a kid, and when you're young and in elementary and middle school, and you disappear for 3 months out of the year, when that's kind of a time where a lot of people bond,
Right,
and then you
right.
come back and nobody's seen you for 3 months, which is a lifetime when you're that young, and
Yep.
then you got bleach blonde hair and lots of freckles, and you just haven't seen anybody. It was kind of a recipe for becoming an outcast,
Right.
and I got pretty sullen for a little bit of time there. My dad was very perceptive of the changes in my behavior, and he suggested that I start karate.
Mm-hmm.
And that honestly was such a changing point for me because that was when I started to realize I was communicating even though I wasn't communicating.
Mm-hmm.
And I realized that the way that I held myself and physically I was, cowarding from some of these people, and the way that I communicated with my body wasn't strong.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was one of the main things I learned in martial arts, and I have studied it for my whole life, is how carrying yourself and how you present yourself is really another tool of communicating. So
Mm-hmm.
I let people know visually I really wasn't the kid to mess with.
Mm-hmm.
And the cool thing is, the more I learned how to be trained as a fighter,
Mm-hmm.
the less I actually fought.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm very proud of the fact that, I didn't sort of go toe to toe and just sort of try to beat everybody up. I really tried to use my words and situations and avoid conflict. So for me, it gave me the confidence. And then when it came to athletics, I chose to uh, participate in wrestling and hockey and things that had a bit of machismo to it, and that gave me even more confidence.
Mm-hmm.
And when I graduated high school, I actually graduated as the senior class president,
Mm-hmm.
uh, voted into office, I guess, from some of the same kids that I had the challenge relationships with before. So, there's it all kind of comes full circle, and it's an interesting life lesson for me. It's kind of been along the lines of belonging at the end of
Mm-hmm.
the day, right? I think
Right.
we all want to feel like we belong, and when you don't get picked for the basketball team and you kind of get outcasted and you feel excluded, it hurts.
Yeah.
It's pretty deflating. And
Yeah.
so I learned a lot during that period, and I'm a pretty gregarious, pretty outgoing, pretty high energy guy. And I think I do have to look back and thank that opportunity to kind of be challenged in that way to overcome it.
Right. Okay, great. And of course, the road to where you are, it wasn't a smooth one. And I'd like to talk a little about this because, when people see someone successful, they think that he's, quote unquote, always had it, you know, has always been an overachiever all his life, has gotten all the breaks on and so forth. But the truth is, well, I mean, we'll speak on the book later, but the truth is the road was a bumpy one, wasn't it?
Yeah, I'm more of a sailor, and the analogy from the road is that I got caught in quite a few storms.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
one of the things that I love about sailing and why it connects with my life is that you really don't have control over the
Mm-hmm.
weather. You have control over your boat and your sails. And I'm telling you, I've almost sunken a few times,
Right.
and I think that through those experiences, for a long time, I tried to hide them, and I
Mm-hmm.
tried to
Mm-hmm.
pretend like they never happened. So
Right.
almost like you were saying, you see these people that are successful
Right.
and you don't read about their failures really.
Right.
And so I thought, well, in order to be successful, I just need to hide these things.
Mm-hmm.
And I tried to hide them the best that I could, but you can't really these days.
Yeah.
And so Leonard, my co-author, was actually somebody who also had a pretty tumultuous past. And
Mm-hmm.
he, instead of, my instinct was to hide it and not say anything and pretend like nothing bad ever happened. Focus on all the good stuff.
Right.
He really got traction when he started to share all of his failures as they were happening, which
Mm-hmm.
is the complete opposite.
Right.
And I think that's what makes this book so powerful, and that's what makes my experience working with him so unique,
Uh-huh.
is that we're very different people.
Mm-hmm.
He's someone who has worn all of his failures on his sleeve
Mm-hmm.
and posts things that I would never post.
Right.
And he helped me understand the value of opening up a bit more. And so for me, when I started to shed the concept of, hey, look at me, this is going great, I actually started to own all the things that had gone wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And when I did that, I realized how much those moments shaped who I am today.
Uh-huh.
And
Okay.
the real transition for me was when I kind of started to own my whole story.
Mm-hmm.
And that helped me to essentially ditch the act and let people know more about me, get to know me. And I think that's really what the book is about
Mm-hmm.
letting people get to know you,
Yep.
flaws and all,
Yep.
because you might not realize it, but uh, I think we all are on a rocky road or a rocky ocean, and
Mm-hmm.
there's storms that we are all hit with.
Yep.
And when you have the courage to share some of these moments, even though it's not easy,
Yep.
it allows people to see themselves in your journey. They feel like they've been on your boat at a certain point, and there's a certain camaraderie and relatability that happens there, and it just kind of releases the pressure valve in a few different ways.
So I want to ask something that Leonard Kim talks about a little bit or mentions a little bit. It's something a concept he calls narrogance or naive arrogance. Would you know anything about this concept? I mean, because I'm thinking there are folks out there who might be living that kind of mindset.
Yeah, it's essentially arrogance and naivety sort of combined together, and I think we all have moments in our youth where we're a bit naive.
Mm-hmm.
And if you combine that naivety with arrogance, the word here kind of combined is narrogance. And I think Leonard definitely experienced that. I know I experienced some of that too.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe some of your listeners can relate. But, when you think about the importance of wearing name brands and the importance of your image and the
Mm-hmm.
importance of the car that you drive and the
Mm-hmm.
importance of sort of how people see you in the world,
Mm-hmm.
which actually might be a lot different than what's really going on.
Mm-hmm.
And Leonard shares a lot of personal stories where, he was flat broke, if not in debt, and
Mm-hmm.
still trying to keep up an image that he was super successful. And
Uh-huh.
I think that dichotomy where, what's really going on when you get home and close the door and you're by yourself versus when you sort of strut outside and sort of pretend that you've got things made,
Mm-hmm.
that disconnect is something that really eats away at your soul.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that I experienced a lot of that when I was trying to essentially showcase my success. And there was a lot of things happening behind the scenes.
Mm-hmm.
Like there was a moment where I was, I had a Rimini red Range Rover with 22-inch Rimini red rims. At the
Mm-hmm.
same time, I also had a Mercedes SL 500. I was
Mm-hmm.
dressing in suits. I was
Right.
suited to boot. I was driving around up and down, and if somebody were to look, they'd be like, "Damn, that kid's got it together. What the hell is he doing?"
Mm-hmm.
But
Mm-hmm.
behind the scenes, I was having a hard time paying my car payments and my
Mm-hmm.
mortgage, and my
Mm-hmm.
credit card debt was stacking up.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that arrogance is just being naive and arrogant to think that what's most important is what other people think. And that
Uh-huh.
really gets you into trouble, and it's a candle where you're burning wicks at the both ends at a certain point. things will sort of collide.
Mm-hmm.
For me, when things collided, I felt like I had no choice but to file bankruptcy. Like
Mm-hmm.
that was
Mm-hmm.
the point in which I had reached. And ironically enough, I had to ask my parents for money to file bankruptcy because I let it
Mm-hmm.
get to that point.
Right.
I went to where I had absolutely nothing left on any card that I could leverage. And at that point, I finally ditched the act with my parents.
Mm-hmm.
And through tears, I just tried to get out. I'm stuck. I need help. I need $350
Mm-hmm.
so I can file for bankruptcy.
Right.
And I did it the cheapest I could, so I had to mail in the application myself, and I'll never forget putting that in the mailbox and, halfway in, a little bit in, and then just the noise as the mailbox shut, and it was just like
Mm-hmm.
this moment in time, like, damn, I totally just failed. And I really had to swallow that, and it humbled me, and I prepared myself for sort of the next step. And 2 weeks later, I actually go to the mailbox and I received my bankruptcy paperwork returned to sender
Mm-hmm.
because I
Mm-hmm.
was short 32 cents.
Okay.
And that was another moment. I was like, wow, here's a second chance. And I ripped it up right there. Then I felt bad because I ripped it up and littered. So I picked it up and I just
Uh-huh.
thought to myself, I got to figure out how to work my way out of this. And I got
Mm-hmm.
a construction job and I started building bathrooms and kitchens and
Mm-hmm.
slowly worked my way back up to even, and then use that as an experience to just be more humble and be more honest along the
Mm-hmm.
way. And so
Right.
I think, narrogance means that you're not asking for help. Narrogance means that you're acting as if, and
Mm-hmm.
I think that it's a difficult trap to get stuck in.
Mm-hmm. Right. Okay. So in your opinion, then, I mean, based on your experience, and I don't know if you've asked this from of other people, but in your opinion, why do people fall into this trap of arrogance?
Well, it's the same reason why we people used to keep up with the Joneses, and now people are trying to keep up with
Mm-hmm.
the Kardashians.
Mm-hmm.
I think as humans, we have a certain perception of how we see ourselves. And then I think we have a certain perception of how we think we should show up in the world.
Uh-huh.
And it could be as simple as, everybody else is wearing those types of shoes and jeans and clothes. Um, I think it comes back to belonging, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like
Mm-hmm.
you want to belong. If you want to belong to a crowd that is successful and well off, you're going to want to emulate. You're going to want to fit in. You're going to want to wear the same clothes. You're going to want to sort of assimilate to those types of behaviors.
Mm-hmm.
Why? Because you associate what they're doing with success.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that that's where if you pull the thread and the yarn long enough and it all comes apart, at the end of the day, wealth and success and what somebody looks like in the car that they're driving really doesn't give you a clear indication of what's happening behind the scenes.
Mm-hmm.
And
Right.
look at so many famous high profile people who you think they have it all together, and then you find out after an overdose, or you find out after a car accident, or you find out after a suicide to the largest the most extreme extent, that they really didn't have it together. They were just faking it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a really hard thing to grasp.
Mm-hmm.
And when you're caught up in it, especially as you're coming of age and you're building your professional career, I think it's so easy to want to belong that
Mm-hmm.
you end up maybe not being as genuine about how you're feeling. Let's think in a job situation.
Mm-hmm.
How often are we completely transparent and honest with our bosses?
Mm-hmm.
I don't think we always are
Mm-hmm.
because we're fearful that they're going to judge us.
Right.
But what if for a second they don't judge you, but it actually helps you build a better relationship?
Mm-hmm.
And that's something that I've found to ditch the act in the workplace is
Mm-hmm.
so important. If you're an employee and you're pretending like everything's fine, but secretly your life is falling apart behind the scenes, or you're having medical issues with a family member, or things are just really rough, and
Mm-hmm.
this pandemic has really exacerbated a lot of challenges that people have had.
Mm-hmm.
If you're not communicating that to your boss, they're not going to be able to be there to support you. They're not going to be able to help you get the resources that you need. And if your performance is maybe lower than normal and you haven't given them context, maybe they will think that you're not doing your job well.
Right.
But if you if you let your boss know these are really things that I'm dealing with that are impacting my life right now,
Mm-hmm.
a good boss is going to be like, okay, I'm here for you. Like, maybe you need a couple days off. How can I help? What are the
Mm-hmm.
resources that the company can give you?
Mm-hmm.
So I think at the end of the day, it's about wanting to belong.
Right.
And when you fake it and you feel like you're not being yourself, it just creates this dissonance, and
Mm-hmm.
that little seed will grow, and it can come out in some pretty unhealthy ways.
Right. Okay. Okay. All right. So, on to the topic. I mean, we're talking about branding here. Now, people, I'm sure, they're a lot more familiar with what we would call maybe corporate branding. You know, like the branding of a product. You know, branding for luxury product, branding of just a commodity. But personal branding is not that I don't think it's much spoken of. Um, that said, I mean, let's face it, there are people who rely on personal branding. I'm thinking like social media influencers. Uh, would you say this would be an accurate assessment?
Well, I think that everyone has, excuse me, I think everyone has a personal brand.
Mm-hmm.
They just don't know it. And
Uh-huh.
my definition of the brand, which we talk about in the book, is that your personal brand is not just what you want to be known for.
Mm-hmm.
I can't wake up tomorrow and be like, I want to be known as an astronaut, so that should be it.
All right.
But it's not just what people think about you,
Mm-hmm.
right? Your brand is not just what the kids on the playground think about you. It's not just what other people are seeing and judge you on, but it's the combination between the two where they intersect.
Mm-hmm.
And so the idea here is that if I were going to find out information on you, if I'm going to meet you, there's a good chance I'll look you up online.
Mm-hmm.
And whatever information I can find online is going to help set my own perspective on who you are.
Mm-hmm.
And then when I meet you, my brain is going to be trying to connect the dots and and seeing where it all matches up.
Mm-hmm.
And so a personal brand is something that you have somewhat control over, but you don't really have control over. And that's what I think makes it exciting, and that's what makes it an opportunity to actively participate in helping to get information out there into the world so people can get a better idea of who you actually are.
Mm-hmm.
And I call them brand crumbs. A
Mm-hmm.
blog is a brand crumb. A
Mm-hmm.
video that you make is a brand crumb.
Mm-hmm.
This podcast is a brand crumb.
Mm-hmm.
It sheds little light onto who I am as a person,
Mm-hmm.
and it gives me a little bit of participatory role in the narrative.
Uh-huh. All right.
So I
Okay.
think from a social media influencer, yes, their brand, they're productizing themselves because they're
Right.
monetizing themselves.
Yes.
But for a single mom who's an entrepreneur, or for somebody who's in the CX level and they want to take it to the next level, for somebody who is a college student that's trying to get their first job, they all have personal brands.
Mm-hmm.
It's just that they're not all taking advantage of participating in that brand.
Uh-huh. Okay. All right. Okay. Got it. So personal branding, I mean, this essentially everyone's doing it. A lot of folks just don't know they're doing it.
Well, everyone has a brand.
Okay.
We have to be careful with the word everyone, because if you're an infant, you're probably, I mean, I guess, you know what? Actually, how about this? You know how people say, oh, my 2-year-old, they're just a terror, right? Well, guess what? You've sort of helped. That's a brand crumb of understanding that your kid's a little reckless right now. But then they grow up, and then maybe now they're into baseball. And so now the kid is being into baseball. My
Mm-hmm.
nephew just turned 7, and he's really into skateboarding. And so, like, as we grow up, we kind of like update. Oh, Johnny or Sue, they're into this. It's all building, right?
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
it's ever changing. Like, I mean, I wrestled, I pole vaulted, I played hockey, all these things, they're all different moments of my brand.
Mm-hmm.
But your brand is the collective culmination of all that stuff. And
Mm-hmm.
the mistake people make is that when they're branding their personal brand as an adult, they
Mm-hmm.
tend to sort of either neglect or ignore or bury
Mm-hmm.
everything that's happened in the past.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe that is a huge mistake, because if you're just trying to quote unquote brand yourself by putting the best brand crumbs out there.
Mm-hmm.
Look at me on this podcast. Look at me on this media feature. Look at my success here. Look at this. Look at that. The problem is that we don't really get as much of an opportunity to connect or relate to your successes.
Right.
But we do have a big opportunity of how to connect by seeing ourselves in that story.
Mm-hmm. Right. Okay. And actually, I'd like to talk a little bit about the way in which we brand ourselves, because I mean, you brought up a point, like people like to, as an adult, they cover up their past. They don't mention their past when they do their branding, and that occurs to me that it's not being, I don't know what, genuine or authentic, something like that. How important is authenticity or genuineness? How important is it to, when you're putting yourself out there, when you've got your personal brand out there?
I believe it is the most important thing because
Mm-hmm.
we all have a BS sniffer. We know when somebody is too good to be true, or we know when somebody's trying to sell us something. We understand that. I think we instinctively know. And I think that we just don't have time for that.
Mm-hmm.
We're not interested in connecting with somebody that is being inauthentic.
Uh-huh.
But when you start to see people and who they are, their values, what they're into, their insights, it actually resonates. And you're like, wow, that kind of resonates. A lot of times it resonates because you feel a connection.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the one thing that you need to get ahead in business today
Mm-hmm.
is to be human.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll give you an example that if you're listening to this, see if you fit in this category.
Okay.
If I look online and try to find out who you are, if I try to essentially search for your bio
Mm-hmm.
and try to understand your backstory,
Mm-hmm.
one is if I find it. A lot of
Uh-huh.
people, you really can't find that backstory.
Uh-huh.
And even if I do find it, are you only showcasing your highlight reel? You're going
Mm-hmm.
to tell me about sale, X amount of percentage of sales and how you successfully sold this company and how you have moved up successfully in your career and you've got recognized as this. You see, bios tend to be highlight reels,
Mm-hmm.
almost like a resume in more dialogue format.
Mm-hmm.
But that doesn't give me a chance to connect with you.
Uh-huh.
And so I think that one of the biggest missed opportunities for personal branding
Mm-hmm.
is helping people know your backstory through your
Uh-huh.
bio, right? I know that you have a cat,
Mm-hmm.
and I've had a cat. His name was Smudge, and we had a great run. And so just because I know that you have a cat, that actually there's a small part of me which connects to you
Mm-hmm.
as a prior
Mm-hmm.
cat owner. But not everybody says that they have a cat or a dog in their bio. Not
Right.
everybody talks about the sports that they love to play. Nobody really talks about some of the more human sides of who you are.
Mm-hmm.
And I
Mm-hmm.
think that gives people an opportunity to connect and build rapport and to get to know somebody as a person and not just an executive or not just as a worker.
Mm-hmm. Right. And I mean, there's also something to this. I mean, like there's fear as well, isn't it? I mean, like if I say, oh my gosh, I'm a cat owner, maybe this person's not a cat lover, maybe this person hates cats. If I mention that, good God, he might hate me. I mean, let's face it, there's always that kind of fear of revealing too much, isn't there?
Well, there's always a fear, and I think that's why a lot of people default to what they think is a safer route, which is just following what everybody else does and make
Mm-hmm.
a very highlighty kind of reel.
Mm-hmm.
But at the end of the day, you have to realize the power of connecting with people who connect with you and your story in your life
Mm-hmm.
outweighs the fear of trying to think that people are going to judge you. I think we all, this goes way back to what we talked about originally, where we feel like we're going to be judged.
Mm-hmm.
Therefore, we sort of default to what the standard is.
Mm-hmm.
But what I have found personally, and what we challenge people to do in the book and show examples, is that when you start to actually show more of a personal side, talk about the fact that you have a cat,
Mm-hmm.
be more human in what you're sharing about yourself,
Mm-hmm.
it lets people see themselves in your story.
Mm-hmm.
It lets people see you as a human.
Mm-hmm.
And there's something powerful about that connectivity, which makes you more relatable.
Mm-hmm.
Brene Brown talks about, authenticity and transparency and vulnerability. And she talks about how a lot of people see it as weakness,
Mm-hmm.
when it actually takes courage to come out and share what's really going on.
Mm-hmm.
And there's something special that happens when you start to share. It opens the opportunity for other people to do the same.
Mm-hmm.
And so somebody's got to go first. And if
Right.
you go first, it's scary to go first, but when you do, it lets other people go second and third and fourth and fifth.
Mm-hmm.
So yes, it is terrifying to sometimes share something online or even with a friend that maybe you're scared about getting out into the world. But once they learn it, they're usually there for you, and they're
Mm-hmm.
usually able to find a common experience that they've had.
Mm-hmm.
And if you think about your loved ones and the people that you typically will ditch the act with the most because you're
Mm-hmm.
so comfortable with them, when you tell them about a bad day or about something that went wrong, what do? They don't judge you and say, that's terrible. They're like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry that happened. And they'll give you a hug and they'll empathize with you and then they'll help you work towards solutions.
Mm-hmm.
Again, I think that, and I have to acknowledge, it is scary to do. Now, Leonard is a lot more proficient at sharing what goes wrong.
Mm-hmm.
To some extent, I think almost too much. It's too much for me.
All
And I
right.
think that we all have a level, we all have a balance between professional and business-oriented content.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that once we can get more and more comfortable with sharing part of our personality, our thoughts, our feelings, our emotions alongside that, you have to find a ratio that works for you.
Right. Okay. All right. Okay. Got that. Okay. This is a very interesting topic, Ryan, and wish we could talk more, but we're starting coming to the end of the interview here. Now, first off, on this book, I mean, this is essentially about personal branding. It's a little bit on the aspect of personal self improvement. Now, I mean, there are a lot of books out there on personal improvement, how to improve yourself in one way or another. What is it about this book that would make someone want to pick it up and read it?
I think the one thing we all share is that there have been things that have gone wrong.
Mm-hmm.
There are failures that we've experienced. And I don't know if we know how to position those in order to help people get to know who we are. I
Uh-huh.
think that this book, this approach, is a way of looking at authenticity by owning all the stuff that's happened, the good, the bad, and the ugly. And there's
Mm-hmm.
something empowering about that.
Mm-hmm.
We're not saying portray yourself as someone who is other than you.
Mm-hmm.
And for a book to say, look, you've got everything you need,
Mm-hmm.
everything in your past, whether you're excited or frightened about it,
Mm-hmm.
that can be used in a positive way to become more relatable and connect with people more often and
Mm-hmm.
with larger audiences
Mm-hmm.
in a way that's authentic. And so this is really an opportunity to show by example. Leonard and I share our stories.
Mm-hmm.
Then we explain why it's so important for you and others to consider sharing your story and owning your story. And then we show specifically how, in an 8-step process, how you can work through and find the stories that you haven't shared and how you can use that as the foundation for content
Mm-hmm.
and how you can sort of navigate the world of social media by not trying to keep up with the Kardashians, but trying to sort of stake your own claim, sharing your own experience, and helping people see you for who you are.
Mm-hmm. All right. Okay. Cool. All right. Great. Okay then, Ryan. Before we end, are there any last words of wisdom you'd like to share, maybe to inspire our listeners?
One thing I'll leave you with is that successful people are not doing what everyone else cannot do.
Mm-hmm.
Successful people are doing what everyone can do, but not everyone does.
Uh-huh.
And what I think we can do every day that not everyone does is smile a little more, be a little more honest when somebody asks you how you're feeling, drink water, get more sleep, work out, open up to friends. If you're sad, process those emotions. Like I think a lot of times when it comes to building a brand, people are looking for hacks and apps. But
Uh-huh.
I just want to share that the best thing you can do to build a brand is just to do small daily activities, creating habits that help you create content to share with the world who you are as a person and what you've learned and your experience. And when
Mm.
you do that over time, there's a good chance people will see you as an expert. They will see your experience and they will see that you have learned lessons, that you've become who you are as a result of those little tiny things.
Mm.
So stop trying to look for the hack or the app. Just know that it just takes work daily. And when you can help people get to know you, it's up to them whether or not they like you. And if they do like
Mm.
you, then there's a good chance they'll trust you. And trust is really, at the end of the day, what will help move the needle in your business and in your career.
Right. Okay. Okay. Well, definitely a different way of looking at it from the standard.
Yeah,
Okay.
and I
Yeah.
think that there's a lot of value in that. I think that if you're trying to fit in by looking and sounding like everyone else, the opposite will happen. You'll just
Mm-hmm.
blend in. I
Right.
think that we all are unique, and when you can sort of own that uniqueness, even if it's a little quirky,
Mm-hmm.
you'll start to feel more comfortable in your own skin, and people will be drawn to that authenticity.
Right. Okay. Okay. Cool. Okay. Got that. Okay. All right then. So, you know, in closing, then, our guest is Ryan Foland. The book is Ditch the Act, Reveal the Surprising Power of the Real You for Greater Success, and you can find it on Amazon. So, Ryan, thank you very much for being an author story. Thank you very much for your insights, and thank you very much for your words. It was a lot of fun being able to speak with you today.
Awesome. And I'm not only an author, I'm a speaker. So if this topic resonates, then I'd be happy to speak at your company or something. And I'll tell you what,
Mm.
here is the deal. Let me give it to you real. The key to connection is to learn to reveal because you are not perfect and neither am I. And that is the exact reason that we see eye to eye because everybody's different, but we are all the same. To be perfectly imperfect is how you win the game. And if you only showcase good and do not share the bad, you will miss connections that you never knew you had. Boom!
Right. Yay! Right. The guy raps as well.
I
Fantastic.
do.
All right. Great, great. Okay. So
Thanks, buddy.
everyone,
And we'll see you online. And if you want to find me online, it's very simple. You just go to ryan.online. Thanks
uh,
for the opportunity to share my story and my book.
yeah, sure, you're welcome. You're welcome. So everyone, check out Ditch the Act and catch you guys next time on Author Story, the home of authors and people with stories that matter.